In Japan, arcades, or game center, are everywhere. They contain a variety of different arcade cabinets, from rhythm games to fighting games to shooting games to racing games, and more. While they may have moved on from their past with their pixel graphics and 8-bit music, arcades in Japan have managed to stick around. But how exactly did Japanese arcades manage to survive and persist among the ever-changing tastes and preferences of consumers? Let's take a look. The very first arcades looked nothing like the modern arcades that are around in Japan today, more akin to miniature amusement parks. They sat on the rooftops of department stores, offering amusement for small children that came along with their parents. One such example of this is Sportslando, which opened on the 7th floor of Tokyo Asakusa Matsuya Hyakkaten in 1931, which featured coin-operated go-karts and kiddie rides. As time went on, these early arcades slowly spread, with new additions such as claw machines, pinball cabinets, and metal games. However, arcades really shot off in the 1970s. The 1970s introduced classic arcade games such as Whack-A-Mole and air hockey. But it would be a crime not to mention the gaming sensation that took the world by storm: Space Invaders. Space Invaders was released by Taito in 1978 and had the player control a ship and shoot aliens that returned fire as they slowly descended. This game exploded in popularity soon after its release and started a Space Invader craze in Japan. Arcades dedicated to Space Invaders, dubbed Invader Houses, popped up throughout Japan, and the game's popularity is said to have even caused a shortage of 100 yen coins. The 1980s and 1990s introduced new genres such as shooting and racing games as technological capabilities increased. Pac-Man, a game developed by Toru Iwatani, was also released in 1980. While sales were mediocre within Japan, it went on to become a worldwide phenomenon, and the yellow protagonist remains as one of the most recognizable video game characters today. Fighting games also found success as they allowed for players to fight each other rather than CPUs. In 1995, Purinto Club, later shortened to Purikura, which allowed users to take and enhance photos of themselves, was released and garnered popularity with Japanese schoolgirls. Towards the latter half of the 1990s, music games started popping up, notable titles including Beatmania in 1997, Dance Dance Revolution in 1998, and Guitar Freaks in 1999. Japanese arcades also underwent some cultural changes during this time period. In the past, arcades were treated somewhat like vending machines, where you could leave them unsupervised and occasionally collect the coins and clean them up a bit. However, this also led to low maintenance and supervision around the arcades, making customers a prime target for robberies and similar crimes. In an effort to change the dark, grungy public image of arcades, the industry made changes to turn arcades into safe, clean places that can provide entertainment to people of all ages. This included better lighting, more staff, and general cleanliness. In addition, a law passed in 1985 prohibited arcades from operating past midnight to decrease the number of incidents around arcades. The 2000s can be characterized by the emergence of internet use for arcade games. This allowed players to connect with people all around Japan and cooperate with or compete against them in real time. Some trends in this decade include metal games, which reached their peak popularity, netting 41.8 billion yen in 10 years, and games featuring collectible cards such as Mushiking, which found success within the younger players and featured collectible cards. Now, we finally reached the 2010s. Here, we saw the revival of music games, with a number of different companies competing against each other with their own games. Purikura continued to evolve, with new and improved effects and increased customizability. Companies have taken advantage of the spread of smartphones by allowing players to manage game data via their website or from specialized apps, and some have even ventured into releasing mobile versions of the arcade games. Now, at the time of recording all this, it's 2020. At the start of the new decade, let's take a look at how an actual arcade looks like. We're here at Imigrande Hiyoshi, which is a stone's throw from Hiyoshi Station. That's one thing to note. Arcades tend to be near stations, in shopping malls, and other places where large numbers of people tend to gather. This particular arcade is a bit unusual, in that it's split up into 3 buildings. The land at this side of Hiyoshi Station tends to be broken up into small pieces, so they probably had some difficulty finding an area to build one large building for everything to go in. Now that you have an understanding of the history of arcades in Japan, let's look forward a bit. What does the future hold for Japanese arcades? Well, first off, here's a graph of the number of arcades in Japan in the last 20 or so years. It's pretty obvious what the trend is, isn't it? The number of game centers is less than a fifth of what it used to be. Just based off of this, the future of arcades in Japan looks pretty bleak. But now, here's a graph of the annual revenue generated by arcades in that same time span. While it's not quite what it used to be, the revenue generated in 2017 was a comfortable 650 million yen. More importantly, you can see that the decreasing number of arcades doesn't seem to have visibly affected the revenue. In other words, the continual decrease does not necessarily mean the death of arcades in Japan in the future. In fact, this could simply mean that arcades have transitioned from small numerous to large and few, with each individual arcade being more spacious and featuring dozens and dozens of different games. In addition, a select number of arcades have begun to feature VR games. This is quite a natural thing, actually. As technology progresses, more and more games that were formerly inaccessible can be played at home now. On the other hand, the newest games, such as all the VR games today, can be hard for most people to play for reasons such as the price of equipment or required computer capabilities. As such, providing VR games for anybody to experience and enjoy is simply another step forwards as arcades continue to keep up with the times. In the future, most arcades could have a number of VR games, and even further into the future, VR could be a common thing in most households, and arcades would have whatever the next step is in entertainment. As they have in the past, arcades will continue to change to match the demands of consumers to stay popular. As time goes on, arcades have changed and evolved to fit our tastes. They have set themselves apart as a place offering exclusive experiences, whether via the games or the social interactions. Either way, Japanese arcades have found themselves a unique spot in Japanese culture, and it'll be exciting to see where they will go next.